this has been one of the hottest topics from the Olympics, well, especially on social media. And we talked about it here on the platform, on basically all of our shows. I am talking, of course, about Iman Khalif of Algeria, who is one of 2 Olympic boxers who has found themselves at the centre of a gender eligibility controversy. As the conversation continues, Khalif has advanced to the gold medal bout and will now face China's Liu Yang in the women's 66-kilogram finals on Friday night. Just to quickly remind you, Khalif and Lin Yuting of Taiwan came under scrutiny after Khalif's first victory at the 2024 Paris Olympics. Following that match, which lasted less than a minute, viewers learned that Khalif and Yuting were disqualified last year from a boxing competition outside the Olympics after failing to meet gender eligibility testing. Both were banned from competing after unspecified tests suggested they had male chromosomes. Now, the International Olympic Committee's president, Thomas Bach, has continued to call the gender concerns totally unacceptable and states the Algerian boxer was born female, was registered female, lived her life as a female, boxed as a female, has a female passport. So joining me now, good friend of the show, Sall Grover. As you know, we're lucky to have her as kind of as a semi-regular guest. She is an Australian owner of social media networking platform. The app's called Giggle for girls, and she's been wrapped up in a landmark case, which we have talked about on the show with her, in federal court, fighting one of the biggest legal cases for women's rights in decades, which echoes beyond Australia. So, Sall Grover, a very good afternoon to you.
Hi, Leah. Thanks so much for having me.
And it's lovely to talk again. Look, I have to say this story has blown up, and you know that. There is so much information, misinformation. Firstly, both these athletes are not trans women. Is that correct?
That's correct. I think that that's a really important place to start. And both of the points you made is that the athletes aren't trans, and there's been so much misinformation that has just been exacerbated by, I don't know, trolls and bots and whatnot, and mainstream media on social networks. It's been quite crazy to watch because, you know, we are living in this era of trans/gender identity ideology where we're told things like biological sex doesn't matter. It can be you can change your biological sex. You have your sex assigned at birth, but it might be different. All of these crazy things, and then suddenly we have this case where a male person who probably, it looks like, has a disorder or difference of sex development, which is what they used to be called intersex conditions. It's called a DSC, so it's just a medical condition which would have potentially made the female at birth, like the birth certificate say female, when this person is actually male. So there is actually a situation where a mistake has been made, and suddenly all of the activists are saying, oh no, this person is female, the sex is all that matters here, nothing else. And so it's just how the ideology is sort of crumbling under this and the confusion that it's creating because nothing of it matches with everything else we've been told. And what it's highlighting is that in law, in society, and in the Olympics, it has to be biological sex, and biological sex is determined by your chromosomes.
So, and there's the International Boxing Association, right? They're the ones that disqualified both Khalif and the Taiwanese fighter, and had tested them. Now, where it's confusing to me is the president and the chief executive of the IBA, flew in to Paris on Monday and held a very chaotic news conference. And they gave contrasting and often contradictory accounts about why they disqualified Khalif. And Kremlev, he's the president, he said Khalif was tested for chromosomes, and the other one said it was for a high testosterone levels. So I suppose what I'm saying here is, I get it, but no one they haven't released results. Has anybody actually seen results from these two fighters?
Well, the results haven't been released because, from my understanding, is you can't, because it is private, confidential information. You can't just go and release medical records without the consent of the athletes. Like, it highlights the fact that the easiest way to fix this controversy literally within the next hour would just be to sex test both of the boxers.
Yeah.
And then there you go. I think the fact that they haven't is quite a decent amount of evidence, because if everybody, for example, if I was in the Olympics and everybody was accusing me of being male and I was just sitting there going, "What are you talking about? I am female," I would have absolutely no problem submitting to a sex test. In terms of the chaotic nature of the press conference, I mean, everything surrounding this is chaos.
Isn't it?
And I think because you've got sort of a very uncooperative IOC, like International Olympic Committee, who are just sort of doubling down and basically saying, "Well, the passport says female and that's good enough for us." And it's like, well, this is where the rubber hits the road on a lot of these issues, because while the countries that these two athletes come from do not have like sort of, you can just go and change your identity documents based on gender identity. In other countries, you can. Like, so, for example, in Australia, in the state I live in Queensland, you can now just self-ID, go and change your identification documents to the opposite sex. And so to find out that the Olympic Committee would just accept that based on nothing else. So it's like any male boxer in Queensland can just go and claim to be female, and the Olympics will welcome him into the ring to go and punch women in the face. Like, this is why it matters, because it can't be that identity documents override material reality. And while we can have empathy for people who are born with certain medical conditions out of their control, of course, but the reality is that, like, men who are now 25 years old, while there might have been confusion when they were infants, they've known for at least the last 13, potentially more, years. They could have known for the last 20 years what the reality is. So, yeah, you never want to add to more confusion or chaos here, but it's just for everybody to sort of understand. Like, I've been saying to biologists, explain it like I'm 5 years old. Yeah. because
yes.
I mean, none of us, the majority of us aren't scientists. We don't understand that there are all of these conditions. A lot of us heard about the case of Caster Semenya and the Rio
bring
Olympics.
up Caster, yeah.
Who, and there was a lot of us at the time who were like, "Oh, this is just an exceptional female athlete." And if anybody was saying, "Oh, this is a man," you were like, "Oh, well, hang on, that sounds a bit horrible. Like, what are you saying? If a woman is really good, that means she's a man." No, it turns out that people who were saying this is a male were correct, because Caster Semenya has a DSD condition that only affects males. So you have DSD are conditions that either only affect females or males. They are still male or female. There's no third sex, intersex, or anything like that. Every single human being on this earth is male or female, including these two boxers.